Welcome back to Theo Thoughts. We are now, this is now the 1 year anniversary of Theo Thoughts. We started just about exactly a year ago, right around Easter time, with our very first episode where we talked about the creation story. And this is now the 20th full length episode.
Isn't that crazy?
It's
20 hours.
Yeah.
Really, probably a little more than that, probably
Yeah.
closer to 25 because
Yeah.
there's things that we go into, but it's pretty crazy. 1 whole year now that
Yeah.
we're into this, and
Yeah,
I can't wait to keep going.
for sure.
But we
Yeah.
owe some thanks
Oh,
to
yeah.
you guys, our Theo Thoughts family, for
Mhm.
listening in week and week out, and now getting the chance to watch
Yeah.
as we get to look at your smiling face through the camera lens. Not really, we can't see you, but you can see us. So anyway, today,
Yeah.
20th full-length episode.
Yeah, and so a little happy birthday Theo thoughts, and just some of the things that have happened. We went from just random poorly edited audio episodes on just Spotify and Apple to getting on the live radio, and then
It's
to
true, it's
getting onto
big.
YouTube, and then now every single thing that has media on it we're on. And we're with the culmination of all of the views from our shorts and our episodes, we're working our way towards like 4,000 to 5,000 views now,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
I like to
Crazy.
refer to it as witnesses.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, last week we posted a TikTok snippet. I think it was of last episode, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it got like 1,500 views within 48 hours.
Not
24
even,
hours.
Less than a day.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Which is, I like to refer to, that's why I like to refer to them as witnesses, because what do you call it? Like you listen or you watch or you see a snippet somewhere, but
so
anyway.
Clearly you guys like that. Now, whether or not it's interesting because posting those, we kind of got two audiences now. We have our recurring audio listener audience, and then we have our shorts audience. Some people really like bite-sized content,
of course,
and so we're starting to get new viewers that are really digging into those little bite-sized minute-long videos, and so hoping to kind of join those two families so that people can see all of the highlights and the culmination of everything that we do.
Well, and thus is the human attention span. It's super short. Like we don't want to be Paul in the situation that the guy falls out the window to his death.
Right.
So that's why we're giving it to you in bite-sized pieces, and the whole meal. If you're on a long car drive or you're sitting down and need some background noise while cleaning or something, we're here for you guys. So thank you.
100%.
And I wanted to give a special thanks to Judd, because this guy does pretty much everything. I kind of just show up, and sometimes I feel bad about it, but he's never complained. So
hey, labor of love. Love doing it.
No. Well, anyway.
So Jordan, why are you wearing a sports jersey today?
So I figured that I would dress sporty. Number one is I kind of realized that I have been looking a little homeless in the videos. And whatever you do, don't go to the 2-minute mark timestamp of the last week, because the camera angle looked like I had a huge right arm. But anyway, I realized I was a little homeless, waking up 5 minutes later to come do this. Put a little more effort into it today, got my caffeine, but sporty specifically because we had an idea last week in the month of March. Now, I understand it's now April, and you're going to get this in April. But March, of course, is known for March Madness, right?
My bracket took a dump this Sweet 16.
I didn't do a bracket. Okay, who did you have winning it all?
I had UNC.
Okay. I don't know. I don't follow March Madness, which is crazy. I'm a huge basketball fan, but and an Atlanta fan, obviously. But so we had this idea. It's like, well, how could we do a playoff of March and like the pandemonium that follows that with Theo Thoughts? And we're going to give you a smack in the face, and we're going to call it Miracle Madness, right? So I was talking to a couple of my buddies, and they're like, well, I just wish Christianity was as cool as other world religions. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? There are great miracles that happen in the Bible. And it made me think, what is the greatest miracle?
Yeah.
So Judd and I, the last week, have brainstormed and come up with a bracket of 8 miracles that is it just in this episode?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. You and I in this episode are going to, Judd and I in this episode are going to break down in 1v1 scenarios our opinions, maybe in some of your guys' opinions online, just to see. And we're going to go out and see what the greatest miracle is in the Bible.
Yeah, so this is going to be a series, which is going to be pretty cool. It's going to be this first episode. We're going to be introducing the 8 miracles that we have culminated as like some of like the top picks. And we're going off of factors like, coolest to have seen. So like most awe inspiring, some of the like just greatest feats of power. and just some of the most profound, like what is remembered throughout
Mm.
history.
Historical and
Yeah.
narrative implication.
Right. And so there's a lot of different things. And so on some miracles, we might be like, oh, yeah, this one, this one just kind of takes the
It's
cake. On some,
obvious, yeah.
we might get the fun bit of just, a little bit of back and forth. But what is great about this is that we're going to get you guys engaged. So how it will work is there are going to be 4 episodes. This first episode, we're going to introduce all 8 miracles, go through the stories, give some backgrounds, a little bit of our own personal thoughts, but not too heavy, just kind of give you an introduction. And then over this next week, we are going to deliberate and you guys are going to help vote on which ones move forward. And so we'll
Mm,
be looking at our Instagram at Theo_thoughts.podcast, where we're going to be posting a bracket and a form for you guys to share and vote. So it's going to be pretty cool. And then second episode, we'll break down round 2, where we have
Final four?
the 2 other matchups. Yeah, the final 4. And then the third round, where we have our final 1v1 winner take all. And then on our final episode, I'll leave it a little bit surprise, but we'll announce the winner, and we'll announce the winners at the end of our following episodes. So
Of
yeah, but it's
course.
gonna be pretty fun.
Of course. And the last little bit of criteria before we get into it, and I had forgotten about this, but we are not including creation
Right?
or the miracle of Jesus. Now, we are doing
Yes.
miracles of Jesus, but not like his birth or the resurrection. Okay.
Right.
Because it just wins. You can't have it. It is the absolute
Yeah.
powerhouse. And if we did have it in there, it would be the absolute winner, but we want to delegate a little bit
Yeah.
and deliberate. So, anyway,
Yeah.
let's get into it. Let's see what we got.
All right. So our starting lineup, just list them all out one by one, and then we'll go through. We have the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego
Mm,
from Daniel chapter 3. We have the day the sun stood still in the battle in Joshua chapter 10. We have just the culmination of everything that happened in Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. The parting of the Red Sea, which I feel like that's going to be a crowd favorite. In Exodus chapter 14. We have Elijah against Baal and the prophets of Baal in 1 Kings chapter 18.
mm,
We have the fall of the walls of Jericho in Joshua chapter 6. And we have Paul getting bit by a venomous snake and just shaking it off like it was nothing
mm.
in Acts chapter 28. So that's the lineups. Jordan, what do you want to start with?
Let's start with. So, do we have them separated into like individual matchups or no?
Not currently. We're kind of just going through all of them.
We
And
have
then,
8. Okay, so let's
yes.
do this then. Let's go 1 and 4 on
Okay.
both sides. So, what's the first one you mentioned and the fourth one you
All
mentioned?
right. First one I mentioned was the fiery furnace,
Okay.
and the fourth one I mentioned was the Red Sea.
Oh man.
Those are 2 pretty good ones.
Okay, well, this is the matchup. You have the 1 seed, which is the fiery furnace, versus the
Yep.
4 seed, the parting of the Red Sea.
Mhm.
So, let's start with just talking about the stories, huh?
All right. So the fire furnace, as we said, was in Daniel chapter 3. Now, for those that don't know, there was a king at this time, King Nebuchadnezzar, who erected a gold statue of himself in the lands, and he made this declaration saying, "Everybody, whenever you hear any musical instruments, you need to bow down and worship this statue, and if you don't, getting chucked in a furnace."
Of course.
And so most people would be pretty scared and would just follow this regardless of what they believe. But there are 3 dudes, three pretty awesome guys: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Rack, Shack, and Benny.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. I like that. That's how we're gonna refer to him now: Rack, Shack, and
It's
Benny.
from VeggieTales.
Oh, yeah. Forgive
Anyway,
me.
anyway.
Anyway, so these guys, now these guys also appeared in other spot in the book of Daniel, but they said, "Well, no, we're not going to do that. We have our one true God, and
Mm,
it's Him. That's it. There's nothing else that we worship." And King Nebuchadnezzar was just like, "Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that?" And the guys were like, "Hey, we either know that he's when we go in and show this faith that he's going to save us, but even if he doesn't, even if God doesn't save us from the fire, it won't matter because he's still the one true God."
amen.
And so they went in with being like, "We'll either live or we'll die. Really, it doesn't matter. We're going to be vibing in heaven anyway." Uh, and so that was kind of their response. And so King Nebuchadnezzar really didn't like that. So he had the furnace turned up 7 times as hotter as it normally would be, and he brought out two of his like strongest warriors to tie them up and put them all in, and those two warriors died,
Yeah, just
like
from
just
getting close to the
yeah,
fire.
getting
Yeah.
close to the fire and chucked them all in. And then King Nebuchadnezzar was just like, "Whoa, hold a second. Was it three guys? Because I'm seeing a fourth who looks like the Son of God."
Mm,
And they were all standing untied, unburnt. And then they came out of the furnace, and he was just like, "All right, that guy, though, that their God, that's the real God. Screw this. We're doing that now."
it's
And
crazy.
that's the story. So it's a pretty, and it's also, we've talked about Christophanies in the past,
Yeah.
and so it literally says one who looks like Son of God.
Yeah.
Who's the Son of God?
Literally Jesus,
Yeah,
right? So there is a Jesus factor to this, and there's also a nostalgia factor because it's such a Sunday school story.
exactly.
You remember
The wind is
it
whistling.
is
Dang.
whistling in here. Anyway, I remember being in Sunday school whenever I was a child and listening to the story of these three kids or men, I guess, getting thrown into the furnace and them not burning up, and then seeing what amounted to Jesus inside the furnace with
Mm-hmm.
them. And it's very awe-inspiring. And I like to think now, what did we talk about? We said coolness. We
Yeah, kind of
said,
like what would have been the coolest to witness, what showed like the greatest amount of power,
yeah,
and then like how much like the narrative aspect and profoundness of what we remember.
for sure. Well, I'd say it's very smug, right?
Yeah,
It's
for
very
sure.
smug.
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like imagine, and they were all they were servants of the king, weren't they? Not exactly servants, but they were like
They
um
they had some part in his.
advisors.
Yes.
They were
Yeah.
advisors of the king. So I couldn't find the word, but for that to happen and be like, listen, dog, like I'm not gonna bow down and worship your statue. I understand you put a lot into this. I understand you are my king, and this is Babylon, right?
Right, yeah.
So this is the city of the
Mhm.
Persian Empire or
Right.
of that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they just decided they were like, man, I'm not about to do this. And then whenever they get thrown in the fire, imagine the people watching, everyone
Oh
down
my
on their
gosh.
knees,
Yeah.
and then just be like, no, I'm not going to do it. And the people who go to throw them in, like you said, die too,
Yeah.
and they're totally fine, untouched, and then they walk out of the fire.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Insane. Absolutely insane. So, heck of a first seat.
No kidding.
So, Jordan, you want to kind of talk us through the parting of the Red Sea?
The parting of the Red Sea. So, which chapter in Exodus
This
is
is
this?
Exodus chapter 14.
So you can't think about the parting of the Red Sea without thinking about what leads up to it,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
that's at first where the implication takes off
Mhm.
because they go through all of this, counting the plagues, and the plagues are a seed in this as well.
Yes.
But through running away from Pharaoh, finally to where they reach the Red Sea, and Moses puts his staff into the water and parts it for the children of Israel to cross. Okay. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen, and I know, Judd, you have, but seen
Mhm.
The Prince of Egypt. And it is just so aesthetically awe inspiring watching the walls of water spread on both
Oh
sides,
yeah.
like an impassable thing. And another implication is what's going on behind them with the wall of fire. So are we
Mhm.
including that too?
I would say in certain aspects, but like when I think of like the fire as its own thing of that was a really cool thing, but that was like full on like God sending down a fiery tornado as
Yeah.
opposed to parting Red Sea that was channeled through the staff of Moses and Aaron.
Well, I'm referring to the wall of fire behind them that separated them from
Right.
Pharaoh's army.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So it's a separate thing. But the
I was
implication's still
still,
there.
yes.
Okay. I'm realizing we're bouncing around a lot, but I'm so excited about this. So, anyway, totally impossible.
Mhm.
Totally impossible and mind-boggling.
Right. And you'd have to think about like what is happening. Like I would imagine that as soon as the staff enters the water, I mean, if you've ever seen Prince of Egypt, like amazing spectacle that shows it.
It's crazy.
But I would imagine like this giant gust of wind just bursting forth and then just that blows everything in these
Mm.
giant walls. And then now the seabed is laid bare to walk on. Like, and this ain't a
It
pond.
was
This ain't a
dry
lake.
land.
This is a whole like this is the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Like this is a big deal. And they're crossing along it. And I can't imagine. I would love to have the opportunity to walk through what that would have looked like because you got these giant walls, and like Prince of Egypt even depicts like fish. You can see the
Mhm.
fish
The
in the walls of
whales.
water.
Yep.
Like that just would have been insane. Like Absolutely crazy.
Absolutely incredible. I am I'm a little biased towards this one. It's actually my background on my phone is
Mhm.
Moses parting the Red Sea,
That's pretty good.
or I guess God parting the Red Sea through Moses.
Yeah.
Um, but just a spectacle and and what it means, you
Mhm.
know. So for Rack, Shack, and Benny, them, and obviously we're not deciding this now,
Right.
but I'm gonna place the Red Sea a little above him, and I'll explain why.
Yeah.
Without the parting of the Red Sea, the children of Israel wouldn't have been able to move into the promised land
Yeah.
and get away from Pharaoh, right?
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what the implications are, just based upon like the smack in your face story of faith by Rakshak and Benny.
Oh, yeah.
But in Hebrews 11, it also talks about Moses parting the Red Sea. So
Yeah.
imagine, like, as a child of Israel, you are being chased down by one of the superpowers of planet Earth in Egypt, right?
Yep.
And you just got out of there. You're ready to go into the promised land that God promised your ancestor Abraham,
Mhm.
and you have what you would think is your back up against the wall, right? And
Yeah.
then God says, no, 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 no. I'm giving you a passage through the wall
Right.
and takes you over the Red Sea into the promised land. Now there's a
Yeah.
couple more obstacles you got to get through before you get into the promised land, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
It's still pretty fantastic.
Of course.
So, that's a heck of a first matchup. So, the
No
fiery
kidding.
furnace and the parting of the Red Sea, both Old Testament miracles, but I kinda like what you said that you wouldn't have Shadrach, Meshach, and Benny without the parting of the Red
Of
Sea, which is
course.
kinda cool. But yeah, a lot of different things to consider. Like I said, I'll repeat those if you want to go read these more on your own. The parting of the Red Sea is from Exodus chapter 14, and the fiery furnace is from Daniel chapter 3. And that's the first matchup.
Of course it
Move on to the
is.
second. All right, what seats next?
Let's go 5 and 8. So imagine it's like 4 on each
Yeah, yeah,
side.
yeah. All right, 5 and 8. We have Elijah against the prophets of Baal,
Mm.
and we have Paul bit by the snake.
Oh my.
So
These are both very smug.
yeah, I think this is just a general thing of like, and you see this with Jesus too, in that there's just a general smugness, just like, really, like
Yeah,
you think you can do this, but I think Elijah, especially, I mean, honestly, they both got a pretty good level of smugness in
for
this.
real.
So Elijah against the prophets of Baal. This is in First Kings chapter 18. Now, so for those that don't know, Baal is a pagan god. We talked about Baal and other pagan gods in the first episode of season 2, God Against the Gods.
That's a
Uh,
great episode.
yeah.
I remember that.
And so anyway, there's a lot of worshipers of Baal at this time. He was a prominent figure, fertility god and
Hmm.
crops and all that.
Yep.
Anyway,
Child sacrifice.
yeah, not
Yeah.
not great.
Not great stuff.
Anyway, so our boy Elijah, he's up on this hilltop with these prophets of Baal, and they're having, a little competition. They're saying just like, your God isn't real. Like, watch. We got this giant wood pile,
Mm.
and Baal is gonna light it on fire. And so they pray and sing or do dances or
They cut
whatever
themselves. They dance naked.
whatever they do to appease their false god Baal.
Hmm.
And wouldn't you guess, the giant woodpile does not catch fire.
Absolutely nothing happens.
Now Elijah, in his typical smug self of just like, oh, watch this,
Hmm.
he says, all right, you know what? Get some water. Get a bunch of water. Just completely douse the woodpile, just from head to toe. Make sure every single piece of wood is sopping wet. Just get it, completely wet and unflammable,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Uh, and so he's like, all right, watch this. Says a little prayer. Boom.
Boom. And it's like, wow, jinx. But whenever I imagine this, and I would want to go into the scripture. You don't have to right now, but I would want to go into the scripture and see how it like personifies um the fire being lit. Because I
Mm,
know it says like nothing existed.
mm,
After that, like it
right. Yeah. Yeah.
totally eviscerated the wood.
Yeah.
So I imagine
Yeah.
like a
This one,
straight
little flame.
beam of like just godly awe-striking power coming down from the sky.
Yeah.
And have you seen those AI recreations of like biblical depiction?
No.
There are ones
Hmm.
online,
That's
and they're
cool.
really really interesting. And there's one that says God or Elijah calling down the fire from God onto the altar against the prophets of Baal,
Mm,
and it's like basically like a fire tornado. And just you see like this swirling pillar of fire and brimstone coming down upon an altar, that would be right. You're unflammable.
Yeah,
And I just think of the smugness and awe-inspiring power. I'll keep using that word, of God here,
for sure. Yeah.
but I think it's up against a pretty underrated one.
Yeah. But even so, you'd ask about it. So this was the prayer he said. So he said, Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that this people may know that you, Lord, are God and that you have turned their heart back. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust. Forgot about that. So it didn't only
Holy
not
cow.
even just the wood pile, the stones and the dust.
How hot
And
does
it
that have to
licked up the
be?
water that was in the trench. When the people saw this, they fell on their faces and they said, Lord is God, Lord is God.
Did the prophets of Baal get killed?
Uh at least not right there.
Okay.
I don't believe so. Yeah, it says they were falling down in worship.
Okay.
Some of them, okay, some of them were seized. But still, so not even wood drenched, not even water drenched wood,
Stones?
stones, the
How
stones.
hot does it have to be for stones not to
I would
turn into
even
magma, to
right.
turn into dust?
I would even argue that's like hotter than the fiery furnace. Like it takes a
Yeah.
lot. It takes a lot to burn stone.
Hot is the word all the way around because this fifth seed
Yeah,
is hot.
yeah,
Moving on. Now,
gnarly.
like I said, I think that this is a really underrated one because if you look through the Old Testament, it's filled with all of these like godly, uh, just like his showing his power
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
And then you look at the New Testament, and you're like, well, they're a little more few and far between. Um, but this is what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So, Paul getting bit by the venomous snake. So, this is in Acts chapter 28. Now, again, for those that don't know, Paul, formerly Saul, he was he was just the guy that wrote most all of the letters in the New Testament. He he persecuted and killed Christians, but then excuse me, he became one of the biggest evangelicals, and it was really awesome.
hmm,
Getting it up here. Okay, so he was shipwrecked on the island of Malta, which is still a real place, and you
it's
can
a
go and
Greek
visit it,
island, yeah.
and it's awesome. So Paul and the other survivors were welcomed by the local inhabitants, who built a fire to warm them due to the raining cold. While Paul was gathering wood for the fire, a venomous snake emerged from the heat, fastened onto his hand. The islanders, seeing that the snake hanging from Paul's hand, immediately assumed that he must be a murderer, and and that though he had escaped the sea, justice had not allowed him to live.
Mhm.
However, Paul shook the snake off and into the fire and suffered no harm. And witnessing this event, the islanders changed their minds about Paul and began to regard him as a godly figure. They even believed that Paul must be a god because he had survived the snake bite without harm. So this was so again, so he had just shipwrecked, and these people thought just like, oh, this is a bad omen, and
Yeah,
this must have been a snake that they thought was like marked for death. Like if this snake is around you, you're dead, and that there must be a good reason for it.
of course.
And then Paul's just like, that's nothing. It reminds me of that clip with Steve Irwin when he was on a talk show or radio show or something, and a snake just bit his neck, and he's just like, oh, don't worry, it's just nothing.
I've never seen that before, but
It's
I like
crazy.
I like the
But
similarity.
anyway, but just that continued smugness was just like, oh, I'm walking in protection of God.
Yeah, big deal. You
Yeah.
know, the Lord Jesus himself told me that I'm supposed to spread his name throughout the nations, right?
hmm
I'm going to bring the good news to the whole world. The
Yeah.
snake isn't going to stop me. Yank throws him off into the fire. And everybody's
hmm
like, "Whoa, whoa, how did you just do that?" Because in other versions it says that it's a viper.
Yeah.
And vipers are venomous. So like this, he was gonna die. Like it was
Right.
judgment. The people had passed judgment and condemnation onto
Yeah.
Paul for something they thought he did.
hmm
And bro was like, "Nah, I'm chilling." Threw it off.
For real. For real.
So I don't know if there's really that much more to say. I don't know how much implication there is. Obviously, like he lived
Yeah.
to tell the story, you know.
I think it's another testament of faith of because they said that after now we've seen people today that have gotten bitten by snakes and be fine,
Hmm.
but they said that because of this, they thought he was a god.
Yeah.
So it must have been something pretty miraculous to witness.
Of course.
And so, like we said, it could have been like some super venomous snake that marked people for death. Like it's just like, oh, you get bit by this, you got 20 seconds. We
Yeah.
don't know what kind of snake it was, but it must have been something that made them think the only way he could survive that, unless he's like a godly figure sent
Yeah.
from God, which he is he's a big prophet. And so, yeah. Anyway, so that is the first 4 sets, and going to move on now to our second 4 sets.
Yeah. So it's gonna. So now we have the 2 seed versus the 3 seed,
Yeah.
and the 2 seed is the plagues versus the 3 seed, which is Pentecost.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation before we had ever done this about like how strict do we want to be to the definition of like miracle, because
Right.
these are like an order of events that you could call one big
Yeah.
miracle. There's 10 plagues and there's like a lot that goes into those.
Right.
But also there was a lot of miracles of Pentecost.
Yes.
So I guess just breaking them down, you have to find like I guess based on our criteria, which ones kind of take the cake,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're all to accomplish one goal.
Right.
So
yeah. So the plagues, so famously 10 plagues. First one, water, the Nile turning to blood. Now, what I think is also something really interesting about these is that in some of these plagues is that it says that some of Pharaoh's soothsayers or servants were able to replicate this with like dark arts.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of freaky because like Satan has his hand in stuff, and this was a pivotal moment for God's people. And so Satan was doing everything he could. Still didn't do squat.
No, not in comparison.
Yeah.
No.
So we got water turned to blood. Then we had just frogs hopping all over the place. Then we had gnats or lice being infesting people and animals. Then swarms of flies and other like insects. Then we had the pestilence and the livestock, so livestock dying.
Yeah.
Then the boils, so people like having stuff all over their body, like leprosy or whatever.
Yeah.
Then we had swarm of locusts, and then we had darkness for 3 days, and then the last plague, the death of the firstborn. So all 10 right there. A lot of stuff happened. Some people would say just like, oh, I've seen a bunch of frogs, or I've seen swarms of bugs.
Well, I think wasn't sort of the point of this that like one thing made like the dominoes fall. So like especially I would say from the first going into the second, the Nile turning into blood caused all the frogs to come out of the Nile.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And then with the frogs coming out, now you have all the bugs starting to scatter, and with the bugs scattering onto the livestock, and then with the sickness of the livestock, people eat that, and then you got. It would be weird about eating something and then getting boils on your skin.
But I imagine that's probably from the insects too.
Yeah, but then that's where it kind of stops, because then you have hail mixed with fire. Raining and that doesn't. It's not really in the dominoes there.
No, I don't think so. Maybe some sort of But that's so cool, bro.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
And it was just so much because Moses continually went back and just like, let my people go, or else something else is gonna happen.
Imagine Pharaoh's advisors, like you said, like some of the magicians being able to replicate this. It's like, oh, like your majesty, it's all just the order of events. This happened, so this happened, so this happened. And the next day, whenever it starts raining fiery hail from the sky, Pharaoh's like, how do you explain this?
And that's
Bob,
the oxymoron: hail, frozen water, fire.
So this can't be natural. It can't be natural.
It don't work like that. And like I would imagine, like also being Pharaoh, because Pharaoh was probably smug for the first little bit, just like the water. Okay, the water, maybe that was something, but then it's just a bunch of frogs and bugs. Like this is nothing. Like I'm not letting your people go. But then just looking up and just seeing fiery hail just raining down, and then darkness for 3 days.
Bro blocked out the sun.
Yeah, for real. Like you was just like, oh. You want to walk out during the day? No sun.
Nope, none. Imagine how scary that is.
I know.
For like a lowly peasant in Egypt. I mean, obviously that's higher than like a Jewish guy, but like a lowly peasant in Egypt having no idea what any of this is.
Right.
And there's all of a sudden darkness for 3 days.
I know. Like people, like Christopher Columbus used a like short, like few minute eclipse to persuade a whole island of whole tribal island that he was God. Like,
Yeah.
imagine what 3 days of
No
darkness is going
kidding.
to
And I
like,
mean,
imagine being those Egyptians. Like, I'd start to feel like some of the people with like Nebuchadnezzar, like they used to worship
oh,
Nebuchadnezzar, just like, look at what they're standing in fire.
and think about what the king of their gods,
I know.
Ra.
Yeah.
You know, he's the king of
The sun.
the sun.
That's I think that was also something I read this is that uh in an effort to show like God's power over everything. So the Egyptian pantheon, they had gods over specific things, and
Yeah.
this targeted some of their like top gods.
Huh.
So like each of these
That's
like
so cool.
like each of these so like the darkness of course was over Ra, and then other
Yeah,
of these were like the god of livestock. Like they had gods and goddesses over
of
everything, but
course.
this was specifically targeting like, look at this, look at I am doing everything that you say your
Mm,
gods can do.
yeah.
Mega.
That's just crazy. Like
Mega.
I can just imagine like we were referring to the Egyptian peasants praying to the king of their gods, like Ra, please, like help us. Next thing, the sun goes out for
It's
three
like no
days.
sun, no Ra.
Exactly. So he didn't answer their prayers because
Nope.
he has no power over the great I am.
For real.
So wow,
So yeah.
that's a heavy hitter right there in our
Yeah.
2 seed.
Hey,
But
but we can't count out Pentecost quite yet.
heck no, we can't count out Pentecost.
So yeah, Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. So this is, excuse me, pretty soon post Jesus, and you
Yeah.
got, it starts with a bunch of people from a bunch of different tribes and languages coming together to meet, and the disciples and other elders are trying to like communicate, and it just really ain't working. And then the Spirit enters, cue the Spirit, and flames appear above people's heads, and people are hearing in their own native language.
Yep.
And then the disciples are like, it's going now. Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna start rolling here.
Yeah. So it's very indicative of God's like choice to break down the barriers of cliques,
Mhm.
because you think there were Greeks, there were people who spoke Latin, people who
And then
spoke Arabic, people who spoke
Ethiopian.
Ethiopian,
Yeah.
all coming to Jerusalem for the festival of Pentecost, which
Right.
happened every single year.
Yeah.
Shortly after the transfiguration,
Mhm.
Jesus said, listen, my advocate's going to be here very, very soon. And they're
Yeah.
praying up, it's in the upper room, isn't it?
Yes.
They're praying in the upper room, and all of a sudden, stop, drop, and roll. You know, you have fiery flames or tongues of fire over your
Yes.
head, and you're able to speak in languages of people you've never met before,
Right.
which breaks up all the cliques.
Yeah.
And then some even crazier stuff happens. Judd, what are some of
Right.
the crazier things that happen?
All right. So first we got all the speaking in tongues, and then we have first off, what I think is really amazing is, so like this is the start. Like this is the start. Like Jesus is gone now. Now it's,
Mm,
I mean, not gone. He's ascended.
he's alive. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He is alive.
Amen. But anyway, and so this is like the start of Christian revolution, and there are people giving their lives en masse, thousands
Yep.
at a time, because in this time now the disciples, they're on fire. And so like there's examples of like Peter's bold preaching and like other people, but there's a lot of stuff happening. But it was just a giant time of conversion, and it just, and a lot of times it said many miraculous signs and wonders happened during this time,
Mm,
because they couldn't even like fit everything. Like if they fit everything, there would have to be another book just called
yeah.
Miracles During Pentecost.
It's like at the end of John, whenever it
Yes.
says if they wrote down everything that Jesus did, not the books in the world can contain them.
Right. But a really cool one that I believe happened like towards the end of Pentecost, but still like stemmed from this, is that people would bring out their sick into the streets in hopes that Peter's shadow would pass over them and heal them.
Bro's silhouette. His silhouette was healing people.
Like that's pretty fantastic.
You want
like,
evidence, like people all the time, and this is a mini sermon, but people all the time are like, well, how can I ever do what Jesus did? And says, brother, the
Right.
Bible says the same spirit that raised him from the dead lives in you.
I know. And the thing, like, so similar miracle with like Jesus was the lady that just knew, if like, oh, if I just touch the tassels
Of
of his
course, I was
robe,
thinking about that too.
I'll be healed, which was an amazing miracle. And he just felt like he felt the power go out of him.
Mhm.
Peter's shadow,
No mass.
no, this is just an absence of photons.
Yep.
In this time. And it was believed to heal people.
Yeah, there was something tangible for that woman who was bleeding to touch.
Yeah.
Literally, it's his presence.
Yes.
It was Peter's presence brought about by the Holy Spirit a silhouette of him from literally a lack of photons, something with zero mass
Yeah.
that hardly even is attributed to Peter at all,
Right.
was healing people.
Yeah. It's
The
crazy.
power of the sun through the sun.
Yeah. I like that.
Mm,
I think it's also a testament to the power of the faith of the people, of
of
like the same,
course.
like Jesus said, like your faith has healed you. And so I think what another really great thing about this time is that these people had faith. It's just like, man, I've seen all the crazy things God could do. I bet if I did this, I bet if I just, if I just sat out here, I bet I could be healed.
Mm,
Like it's just that unwavering childlike faith of like nothing else can distract me from this right now. I believe wholeheartedly in this, and God rewarded that. And in this time of like mass conversion and mass following, like also talking about smugness, like during Pentecost, like there was bold preaching. They would get arrested and they would say, "All right, now don't go preaching again."
back at it.
Immediately,
Imagine the implications of that, because like
right?
it's not like there was a huge cultural change in Israel from the
Yeah,
time of Christ dying and
right.
being crucified by like the Romans
Yeah.
and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They
Hmm.
didn't just change their mind. They witnessed all of this going on, and
Right.
they're like, "Holy crap." It's similar to how I imagine the Roman soldiers felt after they had crucified Jesus, and
Yep.
then like the sky turned black and the
Hmm.
ground shook,
Yeah.
and then like the dead walked the earth whenever
Yeah.
he was reresurrected.
Hmm.
It's similar to that, because the Pharisees decided, like, finally, we get rid of this Jesus guy. Why is he speaking Nigerian like that? He's been my neighbor for my entire life. It's like, why is this guy's shadow healing people? They're supposed to come to me. They're
For
supposed to come
real.
to me for ritualistic healing. Say,
Right.
what is all of this? I'm losing my power.
Right.
And Roman soldiers who are like, oh, it's just pish posh.
Yeah.
Um,
Ain't
religion,
nothing
it
pish or
doesn't even
posh about
matter.
it.
It doesn't even matter. And seeing all of these crazy things, and people who don't just like by proxy of routine go and
Hmm.
believe, but you see their faith and you
Right.
see all these miraculous things happen. And that's
Yeah.
why I think that Acts says like so many things happen that you can't write them down.
Right. Yeah. So truly insane. Honestly, I think a pretty great matchup of like
Oh,
two groups of miracles. You have the mass conversion and miraculous wonders that happened through the disciples and other people, and then you have the plagues of Egypt
mm,
that eventually led way also to the parting of the Red Sea. Those kind of happened because after the last one, after the death of the firstborn, Pharaoh was just like, "Get out! I
yeah.
can't like take your people, take your stuff, get out."
Well, and it's different aspects of God, which I
Right.
think is really interesting.
Yeah.
One is like the wrathful side,
Yeah.
that we saw more in the Old Testament, and the others, the power of the Holy Ghost
Right.
being spread throughout the masses of Jerusalem that
Hmm.
day or those couple days.
Yeah. You kind of see what happens when you oppress people, and then
Hmm.
you see what happens when you have faith and uplift
It's yeah,
people. And
it's
it's different. It's like a parent. Like if I see somebody like bullying my kid, I don't have a kid. If I see somebody bullying my kid, then I'm gonna be pretty ticked, and I'm gonna go and talk to somebody.
of course,
But if I see my kid, helping somebody up, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna go buy you a cookie, man.
this is what it
Like,
was for. This is what
like,
it was for. This is the first thing really that we see after the pinnacle of all creation
yeah,
happens. So you want to talk about implication.
yeah,
There is an implication in the Old Testament and the plagues of power and
mm,
being set free. And
yeah,
in the new one, it is hope in
right,
what is to come.
yeah,
So, man, 2 versus 3.
yeah. All right, now we got our
Incredible.
final seat. We have the day the sun stood still, and we have the
Mm.
fall of the walls of Jericho.
Same
So,
book.
yeah, both in Joshua. We have Joshua 6 and with Jericho, and then we have Joshua 10, the day the sun stood still. So let's go chronological.
Okay.
Jericho.
Well,
Why don't
you
you
want to
break it down?
you really hope my argument doesn't crumble. So, wow. Obviously, they go into what's supposed to be their promised land,
Yep.
and they find a city
Yeah.
with huge walls. I forget in the Bible, it's either Babylon or Jericho. They say that you can ride 5 chariots
Mm,
side by side
mhm.
across. It might be Babylon,
Okay.
but and I guess that pertains back to the first matchup that we had, just
Mm,
how great Babylon was.
yeah.
So who would want to stand up against King
Mhm.
Nebuchadnezzar, right? But Jericho was nothing to
Is it
spit at
yeah.
either.
I mean, its remnants are still around today.
Big old city. And what's crazy is if you like, there's geological evidence of the walls not falling to one side or the other, but just imploding
Yeah,
and then
evenly
separating.
dispersed rubble.
So you have the people of Israel there, and what's crazy to me is God gave them victory, but like I've never like looked at, and maybe it's because of the God factor, but
Mm,
I've never looked at the people of Israel as like profound warriors. But as they enter the promised land, it's just victory, 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 victory,
yeah.
victory, which means they were laying the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool.
yeah, I,
But anyway, so with more of the story of Jericho, so specifically, so Jericho, so this is right out of Joshua 6. Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. The
hmm,
Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have handed Jericho over to you and its king and the valiant warriors, and you shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city at once. You should do so for 6 days. Also, 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark of the covenant.
yeah,
Then on the seventh day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, everyone straight ahead." So he just paves it out like straight, like this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to do, and this
mm,
is going to be the result. So Joshua was like, okay, go forward and march around the city. And
yeah,
so they started doing it, and they would wake up early in the morning and they would pray. Then on the seventh day, they got up early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same way 7 times. Only on that day did they march around the city 7 times. And at the seventh time, a lot of sevens, when the priest blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. But the city shall be designated for destruction. It and everything that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab, who we talked about last episode, who are with her in the house shall live." But anyway, go in, and then all of the people shouted, and then the walls
came a
fell.
crumbling down.
And I think that is so epic. Like this was a big city, and obviously it took them a while to march around this, and they're blowing trumpets. Now I play trumpet. If I blew my trumpet and then screamed and then a building fell down, I'd be pretty scared just being the one blowing the trumpet, but
You'd feel
also
empowered for
yeah,
sure.
but like because they never raised a sword against the wall. They never used a catapult. They never like tried to climb the wall.
Nothing.
Like it said, like it was shut. Like there was no way for them to get in. But just with, I would imagine like being a guardsman and like hearing this every day for 6 days and just be like, man, nothing's happening. It's the same yesterday, today, and
Yeah.
tomorrow. Nothing's gonna happen.
I can imagine on the first day, like, what are these fools doing?
Like,
Like, I'm not even gonna waste
like you
my
giving us a
ammo on you.
parade? Like,
Yeah. I'm not
like
even
I'm gonna
gonna
eat
waste.
some popcorn while I'm
I'm
waiting.
exactly. I'm not even gonna waste my. It's you've seen the Veggie Tale?
Yeah.
Josh and the Big Wall, how they have their
Hmm.
slushies and they're throwing their
Yep.
slushies down at them. Well, it's like I'm not even gonna waste the ammo on you of my
Right.
arrows because you're not doing anything. You're just taking your
Yeah.
populace and walking around the walls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that that's probably a long walk.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
children
it's
of
a city.
Yeah, the children of Israel. Imagine walking all the way around Greenville.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
that's a long walk, bro.
yeah.
And on the seventh day, 7 times.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. You gotta
So
you gotta go on a light jog there.
I think again, and like carrying the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
I just think that it's another testament of faith. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like with faith, you can move mountains, and in this case, it's
Hmm.
you make the city crumble.
Yeah.
And again, like now that we're nearing the end here, and especially after such a heavy hitting one, it doesn't have the same luster that it would if we talked about it first. But
Right.
it's still so cool.
Like I'm still imagining, I would love to see like a thematic representation of this from
Mm,
like a guard's point of view, because this was like all of Israel. So this was a lot of people. This was like thousands of people
yeah.
and marching around. And so it might be a
And
little
all of Israel would be millions.
right. Like it was a lot. But to be on the seventh day, just being like, man, they're walking around a lot of times,
Yeah.
but okay, I don't care. And then hearing just this really loud blast, and then all of Israel shouting,
Terror.
all of Israel shouting this battle cry, and then watching your defenses just immediately just boom,
Well,
all
so
around the city, not even in one spot either, the entirety of the city.
so if you think about this, in the Seattle Seahawks stadium, it's supposed to be the loudest stadium in the NFL, or at
Yeah.
least it was back in the earlier 2015, 2016 days.
Hmm.
There was a championship game that was held there, and it seats about 60,000.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they screamed and cheered so loud that it caused a magnitude 4.0 earthquake with 60,000
That's
people.
gnarly.
So imagine what do they say, like 2.2, 2 or 3 million
It was a
Israelites.
lot. It was a lot.
Imagine, it said there's 2 million men. So I
Yeah.
imagine like the women and the children
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
Imagine the terror, bro.
I
Oh, people screaming.
Bro, what the worst time to be a new private in the army of Jericho?
No
Like,
kidding.
oh my gosh. Like imagine first day on the job and you're just like, "Man, this is easy. I just have to watch these people walk around playing instruments all day
For
on a
real.
parade." And then 7th day, oh,
Yep.
that I'd love to see a thematic representation.
Representation.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that'd be super dope. So then to another one that I think would also be a really great thematic representation, the day the sun stood still.
Mind boggling, you
So
know?
yeah, this was just a little bit later in Joshua chapter 10. And then so this same people, now they're in a battle, they're in a war here.
Against who? Just
This
like
is
the
so
Canaanite people
this
or
was verses 12 through 14. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Aijalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the people had revenge upon their enemies. Is this not written, forgive me, I stutter sometimes. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel.
mm,
So like we've talked about other examples of like the 3 days of darkness,
yeah.
but imagine like the sun just staying up for the entirety of a day. Like you think, oh, the battle will chill once the sun starts to go down and people will
Yeah.
start retreating. Nope. Nope.
No. And it says like the people of Israel enacted their revenge upon the Amorites.
Yeah,
So
like
it was
they
a slaughter.
they 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 laid waste. But I think it's going back to like this is God's people. This is God's child here.
Yeah.
Like Israel is God's child. And he's just like, yeah, we'll make the sun stand still. Like
Boom.
because like he's paving the way for them, and he's just like, all right, so this is how they're gonna win. So I could, I could do this, but I think what would be really cool is if we just made the sun just stop. And I think that would be something crazy to behold.
This is so different because like other miracles, there is an attempt by human beings to explain it off, right?
Yeah.
There always is.
Hmm.
You could, I mean, people have tried to explain the parting of the Red Sea to natural phenomena. People have
Yeah.
tried explaining the plagues to natural phenomena.
Yeah.
And I guess like in Alaska, maybe there's days where the sun shines for 24
Yeah.
hours, but
Yeah.
not in one spot in the sky. Like
Right.
God changed the astronomy and probably the tides and probably
Like
like all of these things probably went on so that he could give his children more time to kill
yeah.
their enemies.
Like I'm trying to imagine like even just the like the physics of like all what would go into like if the earth stopped moving right now, we would all be flung off into space.
Of course, yeah.
If the earth stopped spinning, if the moon stopped orbiting, then tides would go out of whack and it would fly off into the distance, and then that would just be a whole other thing. Now the sun, if anything happens with the sun, we're just kind of dead. And
Mhm.
so God, in all of his infinite wisdom and articulate and uh, intelligent design of things,
Hmm.
knew exactly how all of this would have to happen so that, we wouldn't get flung from the earth or any other possible disaster that could happen from, just tweaking with the solar system.
Yeah.
So, so this is pretty insane.
Yeah.
So like a lot of these miracles are happening like on Earth. Like hail falls sometimes, not hail fire, but
Yeah.
and sometimes there are eclipses and dark days or cloudy things
There's going to
like
be an
or
eclipse
like
soon.
I know, yeah, next week
Yeah.
it'll be a total eclipse.
Yeah.
It'll be pretty cool. But like there have been times where volcanic ash have caused like long winters and other stuff. But like just to keep the sun in one spot for like the better part of a day. Insane.
For a day.
Yeah.
For a whole day.
Yeah.
In the middle of the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Right.
Absurd. And do not quote me on this. And I had talked to you about this before, but I have heard somewhere that you have to account for a whole day in like the lunar and
Mm,
solar cycle
mm.
of the sun and moon not moving in order for
Interesting.
it to fit the cycle that it's in now.
Interesting.
And I've heard of this. I don't know how like doctored it
Right.
is,
Yeah.
but I've heard that is the case.
Cool.
So, I mean,
I have
I
to take
guess,
another look at that.
yeah, think about, your most whimsical possibilities, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
So
wow.
that is the starting lineup. That is round 1 of Miracle Madness. So, like we said, there's going to be a bracket. Of course, visual. You'll see it in the video. Well, you'll see it maybe right here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, but check out the Instagram because that is where we're going to be posting stuff. That is where you can vote at Theo_thoughts.podcast.
Yes,
Share
please
it with a
vote.
bunch of people. Comment. Let us know what you think about this. Like, we want to know like what parts of the miracles. We want to know why you voted this way.
Yes.
And so, of course, you'll see it. But again, we have a lot of really great miracles here.
Course.
We got the plagues, the furnace, sun stood still, Pentecost, Red Sea, Elijah against the prophets, walls of Jericho, and Paul being bit by a snake. And I think a lot of really nice matchups too.
Of
Like, it kind of
course.
happened that like they compare nicely in cool ways.
Also, we are going to, at the very end of this, we talked about going over honorable mentions.
Yeah.
So if there's one that you wanted to see represented that you didn't, and obviously we talked about the resurrection, the
Yeah.
birth, and creation, right?
Yeah.
But if there's ones you wanted to see and maybe didn't, then give us a shout out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that we can talk about them, because there's
Yeah.
other ones that we deliberated
Right.
on putting
Yeah.
in. But ultimately, this comes down to you. We're not sitting here arguing one over the other right
Right.
now. That's for you guys to decide.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll be disappointed in you, maybe not. But anyway, it's been a good time.
It has been really good. So again, with all of the media things, Instagram, I already said that. We're on YouTube, Spotify, everything, but YouTube for the video podcasts. We're also live on the radio, WGRN 89.5 FM, Greenville University Radio, Monday night, 7 p.m. Central. Follow us on TikTok.
Please.
And that's been a growing thing. And so you can see a lot of the snippets. We'll have a lot of snippets from from this series. But also share this out. This is, brackets are something shared between groups. Share this with people. You might think it's fun.
Make a bracket.
Yeah. Let us. That would be really cool. You know what? Once we post the bracket, we would love for you guys to fill it out with what you think or what you want, and we can even talk about some of those in the last episode. Anyway, I think that's all.
Wow.
So
very
yeah.
fun. Very fun.
Looking forward to all of this.
For sure. Well, it's been a blast.
Yep. I'm Judson Page.
I'm Jordan Peter now.
Love
y'all.
y'all.
God bless.